Well, good evening everybody, and welcome to this sneak peek of the new Leisure Holidays Battlefield Tours brochure. Now, this should starting to be landing with quite a lot of our existing customers. Many of you will have received this in the post today, which is the little package containing this, our new Battlefield Tours brochure, which you can find more details online at leisurebattlefields.co.uk, of course. But I thought what we'd do is go through our 76, the largest number that we've ever had, 76 Battlefield tours, of which 21 are new, all of them led by specialist Battlefield guides. So, Leisure Holidays, the leading Battlefield tour operator, we've been going for more than 35 years, but from a Battlefield perspective, 21 of those, and I guided the very first Battlefield tour in April 1997. So after all these years, I can jokingly say it's nice to see myself on the cover there. But this is from when we did our little filming trip for the new Leisure Battlefields advert, and this is some of our Leisure regulars and old friends as part of that, and we're pictured in Connaught Cemetery at Thiepval, near Thiepval Wood. Anyway, let's have a look inside. So we've got our usual spiel talking about why it's important to come on the battlefields, and from our MD Ian Henry talking about the company and battlefields in general, and it then moves on to details of our specialist battlefield guides who work with us. We've got quite a mixed crew of different people from different backgrounds, not all ex-military, many from an education backgrounds. Many people fascinated by the subject of the First World War, and this is what brings all our guides together, is their passion, commitment and fascination with the subject. And just a few weeks ago, Jackie Shaw joined us. She's at Jackie Shaw 74 on Twitter, and also at Holt's Tours on Twitter. She now runs Holt's Schools Battlefield Tours, and there's a little bit about what we do with those, and I'm very lucky to be involved in that myself, and we're moving that forward to bring the story of the battlefields to a new generation of young people, and that's really important. And there'll be a new Holt's brochure, which we'll be doing a sneak peek of, that will be coming out soon. So, getting on to the tours. The centenary is coming to an end, but interest in the First World War, for example, is far from over. So for 2019, we're looking at a lot of different themes connected with World War One. And this new tour, Oh What a Literary War, looks at the war poets, but not just the poets, the writers of the Great War. We'd go out to a number of battlefields connected with them, both on the Somme, in Flanders and at Arras. And the big focus of it, of course, which is what brings many people to the First World War, is the poetry of Wilfred Owen. And we go to the Somme Canal to look at that last great battle of the First World War. All Quiet on the Western Front is our staple tour, our main introductory tour to the First World War. Thousands of people travel with us on that tour every year to give you a good introduction to what World War One on the Western Front from a British and Commonwealth perspective was all about. And you can do a weekend trip where you look at Ypres and the Somme and extend that over 5 days and include Arras and Vimy Ridge. Two of our old favourites, which we're continuing to run with: Crimson Coast, looking at life behind the lines, women in the Great War, foreign labour along that coastal belt. Old Contemptibles, which looks at the beginning of the First World War, from the first shots at Mons, the retreat from Mons, Locato, first Battle of Ypres. And we've given some new life to one of our old favourites in Flanders Fields, taking in a lot of new locations and retaining some of our favourites, but including monuments like the incredible Black Watch Corner Memorial at Polygon Wood. A new one for 2019 is POWs on the Somme. This looks at the POWs battalions, predominantly from the north, but not just from the north. Lovely photograph there of the Sheffield City Battalion, for example, because we get a lot of inquiries about Serre, and a big chunk of this tour is going to Serre to see where the Accrington POWs, the Barnsley POWs, the Bradford POWs, the Leeds POWs, the Sheffield City Battalion, and so on, all fought in 1916. A really good and interesting in-depth tour looking at the Battle of the Somme. We continue to do Anzac Day, which is 25th of April every year, of course, and have a commemoration at Villas Bretonneux, and there's a new Monash Centre there, which is excellent, and that's a tour that ties in with that. Another new one for 2019, Tanks and Trenches, that looks at tank warfare in the First World War and includes a visit to Flesquières to see the new tank museum. And one that I'm particularly proud of for 2019 is to continue with the idea of a centenary, but beyond the actual war itself. So this is the Aftermath Tour, looking at the signing of the armistice in 1918, the Treaty of Versailles, and then the aftermath, the reconstruction of northern France, the construction of the cemeteries and so on. And for this, we're going to tie in with the new opening of the Commonwealth War Graves Commission at CWGC on Twitter, the Commonwealth War Graves Commission Visitor Centre in Arras. And you'll get to see that as part of this tour. And also we'll be visiting the 3 experimental cemeteries, which are the first cemeteries built by the Commission after the war. So a fascinating tour from a very different angle, but continuing with the idea of centenary, because the First World War, the commemorations of the First World War, and our understanding of the First World War is far from over. We've got 2 tours looking at beyond the Somme, as I call it. Verdun, which we've been doing for quite a few years, but a new one, Champagne, Argonne and Verdun, going to what we see here, the incredible trenches at the Man de Massige in the Champagne, and visiting some of the key sites where French soldiers fought, American soldiers fought, but an area where it is beyond the understanding or knowledge of most people who go to the front, and this gives you a chance to understand that important part of the Western Front. We've got our walking tours, walking the Ypres salients. We brought in some new walking the Somme routes this year, which continue into next year. Although the centenary of Passchendaele will be 2 years old by next year, we continue to get a lot of people that want to understand that critical and iconic battle of the First World War, and this 5-day tour staying at the Novotel in Ypres is very much about that, starting with Messines and then moving on to the Third Battle of Ypres. Beer and battlefields, far from being disrespectful. Of course, British Tommies, not being an army of choir boys, did like to have a drink now and again, and this tour looks at what they did, what they drank, where they went to behind the lines. We have one that runs during the main course of the season, and then we do a Christmas special where we look at a couple of battlefields, go to some Christmas markets, and also taste some beer. Another new one for 2019, above the battlefield, we get asked about the Royal Flying Corps, Royal Naval Air Service, and of course the Royal Air Force, and we're in the centenary year of them, and this new tour looks at that aspect of the First World War. I remember John Giles, one of the great authors of the First World War, the founder of the Western Front Association, said many years ago at a talk that I went to, we should not just look at the front, we should look at above the front to understand fully the First World War. And this tour looks at the role of the air services and some of the great aces of the war, and what the air services did as part of their contribution to the conflict. Forgotten battlefields of the First World War, that looks at some of the lesser-known areas, such as Fromelles, Albers Ridge, Festubert, Loos, Arras, Cambrai, and so on, and takes in some of the great memorials to the missing of the First World War, Le Tourret, and also the Arras and Cambrai memorials. And then we have a tour that covers 3 conflicts, Battlefield Belgium with Waterloo, the First World War in Flanders, and the Second World War and the liberation of Belgium in 1944. So if you fancy doing a tour where you're not sure what your interest is, this is a good way of covering a number of subjects, to give you a bit of a grounding and then perhaps to come back. Western Front end-to-end tour we brought back again for last year, and this takes you on 9 days. It's the only tour of its kind that takes you along the entire Western Front, from the Belgian beaches right down to the Swiss border, and you see a good cross-section of the different types of battlefields that there are along the 450 miles of the Western Front. Gallipoli by air, we look at the Gallipoli battlefields of 1915, amazing battlefield to go to, incredibly beautiful, but tinged, of course, with the sadness of the campaign there in 1915. And our Turkish hosts, incredibly generous and kind people, great place to go to. Armistice in Flanders and on the Somme. We've run that, of course, for the centenary this year, but we'll continue to do that next year. A lot of people like to be there on the 11th of November, and those tours continue with that. D-Day is another one of our mainstay tours. Next year will be the 75th anniversary, and we've got 4 and 5 day tours running throughout the year, plus also a walking tour of the D-Day beaches. We've got a new Liberation Route tour that is a 7-day tour that takes you from Normandy through to the breakout battles, through to the liberation of Belgium and the Netherlands, where we end up at Arnhem. So it's D-Day to Arnhem, this tour essentially. The first time we've put all those together into one tour to look at that continuous story from D-Day through to the end of 1944. And with the anniversaries next year, we have both D-Day and Arnhem anniversary tours in the brochure to take you there for the 75th anniversary to meet some of the last veterans. Walking Arnhem is a new tour that's been brought in from some of our Arnhem specialists to walk the Arnhem battlefields. Places like the used to be perimeter, great for that, get a fantastic understanding of the battle. Jonathan Ball, one of our guides, has introduced this one, Battlefield Netherlands, that looks at the eastern flank of Holland, of the Netherlands, and the fighting there in 1944 and 1945. Some incredible locations to visit there, the Buffalo near the River Mars, and the Eyewitness Museum at Beek. Just an amazing collection of Second World War material there. Operation Market Garden and Arnhem, two mainstay tours for us, fascinating subjects. We've just had the commemoration of Arnhem recently. It's a subject, the 9 days there and the Battle of Arnhem is something that the fascination for that never goes away. We've got tours looking at panzers in Normandy, the race to Remagen and the infamous and famous Remagen Bridge. Dunkirk, since the movie last year, we had a huge amount of interest in that, and our Dunkirk and Fortress Europe tour, led by the irrepressible David Warren on the whole. He's been doing that tour for us for many, many years, incredible knowledge of it, and Jonathan Ball and Mark Hope, also two of our guides, have been doing that tour on a regular basis as well. This gives you an insight into Operation Dynamo and some of the key battlefields such as the Mole and the Beaches connected with that story. The Maginot Line takes you underground. Tanks in Town is a tour we do once a year for the liberation of Mons, where they have a tank parade in the town. The Battle of the Bulge, that great German offensive at the end of the war, and the American and eventual British reaction to it. We have a good look at that on this tour. We have a follow-on tour now, Battlefield Luxembourg, following General Patton, that continues with the story of the Battle of the Bulge in Luxembourg on into 1945. And again, some fascinating museums, tanks, and other battlefield sites visible on that one. Our Commando Operations Tour, 7 days looking at commandos and rangers in World War II, ever popular. And we've got another new tour for 2019, which is our U-boat tour, going to Germany to look at the U-boat bases at places like Wilhelmshaven, Kiel, Bremen, and so on. And you get to go into 2 U-boats on that tour, one on dry land and one that's still afloat in one of the docks. So an incredible experience. Air War Europe, looking at Colditz, Dam Busters and the Great Escape. 9 days going across Europe, looking at the role of Bomber Command of the American 8th Air Force. Peenemünde, we go to the Baltic coast in Germany to look to see where the V weapons were developed and launched. We've got 2 Dam Busters related tours. One is the Lancaster bomber experience, where you get to go in a Lancaster bomber and enjoy a taxi ride up the runway inside an original aircraft. Incredible experience. And then we've got the anniversary of the Dam Busters raid. We did the 75th this year. A lot of people asked to go back, so we've brought that back in for 2019 as well. The Italian campaign, the D-Day Dodgers, of which my father, of course, was one. Those of you who follow me on Twitter will know his story. This tour, 12 days, following it on a coach, going across Europe down into Italy to do the battlefields from 1943 to 1944. Or if you don't fancy a long trip, we've got our 5-day fly tour where you can fly in and do Anzio, Monte Cassino and San Pietro. We've got the rise and fall of the Third Reich in 2 ways of doing it. Again, 12-day coach tour going across a huge area of Germany, connected with the story of the Nazi regime in the Third Reich. And then a 5-day one where we look at some of the key sites in Munich, the Eagle's Nest, which you can see here, Berchtesgaden, and also Third Reich Nuremberg as well. A new tour developed by Neil Cherry, fantastic Second World War author, and expert on particularly Arnhem, but also done a lot of research on Operation Anthropoid, and he's drawn up this new tour for us here, which takes you to Prague by air to have a look at that story, and also out to Lidis to look at the massacre site, which this is what this memorial is here. Fascinating, but of course a very sad story as well. We brought in this tour last year, for this year rather, for the Behind the Iron Curtain, looking at spies and espionage in the Cold War. And then Downfall in Berlin, looks at the story of the end of the war in Berlin. And next year will be the 30th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall. So we've got a tour going out for the anniversary of that. We've got our Holocaust tours, the darkest chapter of the Second World War, with a 12-day tour going across Netherlands, Germany, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Czech Republic, looking at some key sites. And then a 5-day one where we fly to Krakow and go to Auschwitz, look at the Krakow ghetto, Schindler factory, and the Polish Home Army. Jersey, to look at the liberation and occupation of Jersey during the Second World War. France under the jackboot, that looks at the occupation of the French mainland. And then a couple of new tours for 2019 again. Stalingrad, going to that iconic battlefield of the Second World War with our Stalingrad expert Paul Errington. Vietnam War with Scott Brand, another one of our guides, who's taking this tour out in the spring of 2019. 16 days looking at the Vietnam War in depth, both from the north and the southern perspective. And then battlefields even further afield with the American Civil War and the Zulu and Boer Wars. As well as, of course, the Napoleonic period. A new tour developed again by one of our Napoleonic specialists, David Warren, Emperor's Napoleon, Decline and Fall. And then at war with Wellington, the Peninsular War. We've got our Waterloo reenactment weekend tour, Walking Waterloo, and another new one for 2019, the Spanish Civil War. That looks, it's a fly tour going into Spain to look at the events in Spain in the late 1930s. And in terms of UK-related stuff, Richard III's Battle of Bosworth tour and the Edinburgh Military Tattoo. So, an awful lot in there, and I've rambled on way too long, no doubt, but hopefully that's given you a bit of a flavour of what we've got coming. You can request this brochure online at ledgerbattlefields.co.uk. You can ring Ledger to order one. You can send them an email. You can fill in an online form. You can book a tour from a very low deposits, only £50. And we have a huge array of dates, departures and subjects for you to choose from. So I hope you found that interesting. Certainly hope to see you on some tours in 2019. And it's good night from me.